we were on the wrong Zoom meeting for this presentation. So Zoom folks, we will be sending out a recording of that first bit along with a copy of Glenda's PowerPoint, which unfortunately you missed. But you will have that in your hands today or tomorrow to look at and print out if you want. So now, any questions or comments for Glenda?
I have a question on the part-time, full-time. You said you had to work, you can negotiate a contract for more than 20 hours?
Yes.
Did you say you had to work 20 hours or less? Or
Can't work less than 20.
you can work?
Cannot. It's
Okay.
okay. So they have to at least 20. Okay, to be part-time, and then or up to.
One caveat: you could have somebody work less than 20. If you want to be able to offer benefits, it has to be 20 or more. And that's not necessarily that the church pays the benefits, or it may be, you say, you may purchase benefits through the church, or we'll split it with, or that's the negotiation part. The 20 hours relates to qualifying to be eligible for somebody to purchase benefits.
And don't we have to pay the thing for the Presbyterian? We have to pay it at that rate. Do you remember talking about the like retirement?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the full-time installed pastor is eliminated, if that position is eliminated, I don't think you have to pay vacancy dues. If you hire a retired pastor, then you do.
I think I feel like it's been a while. I feel like it was suggested but highly recommended. If that makes sense. So that was the thing about that amount, and it's based, I think, off of the full time. Yeah, I could be that. Is that correct?
It's a deal here that the Presbyterian has increased the beginning salary. What is that beginning salary? I'm sure it depends upon size.
The minimum salary for a full-time installed pastor is $50,000 plus full participation in the benefits program, which is 36 or 37% on top of that, or you take 37% times that base salary, which would be salary and housing. So it's close to 70.
Which, is Steve there? Maybe Steve. Okay. Steve Derman, are you? Did we feel like it was?
Wasn't your question about full-time though?
Sorry?
Wasn't your question right now about full-time?
Yeah.
But we're talking about part-time.
Yeah, he was just saying that it
What
went
would
up.
it be?
It went up,
Okay.
and I think it, because it did go up. I have that somewhere. Is
Probably
it
go
like
up in
86,000 or 90 a year? We were talking about
Be 70 something.
70 something. Okay.
That's a minimum.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a personal question. John, are you eligible to be a part-time minister here? I mean, just when we're looking around trying to figure out what to do, I'd like to know if your name is in the box or not.
Thank you. A number of people have asked me that, and technically I would be eligible, but I have made a decision that I want to be a transitional pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. That's how I've always served, and I've loved it. But now I want to help churches prepare for the future, make the best decisions and preparations for future ministry. That's what I feel called to. So I can stick around to help you. There isn't a hard and fast date either way of that January 31st, but I'm going to remove my name from the hat in terms of ongoing pastoral role. I really want to focus now in the next several months helping everybody kind of wrap their arms around that and hearts and rethink what it means to be a church. And I'm excited about that.
Any other questions? There's no bad questions. Anything on your mind, or you'll go home and say, I wish I'd have been asked. Go ahead, Kevin.
I mean, growth in the church is pretty important, I think. And I think that, everybody should think hard on that, on how we possibly can do that. And the other part of that is, are there struggling churches in Ennis that we might want to invite in to join our church, for example? And I'm just throwing those things out there because I'm looking for any possible way to grow this church.
Okay, the question was, growth's important, which
Yeah.
obviously, and that maybe we could go out and see if there's other churches that needed to combine. These are all great ideas.
We have the facility.
Right, and this is what, when the book comes up, we need to think that way. Like, we need to think about great ideas and people coming forward, and not a bad suggestion. Everybody needs to be ready to just, let's get going, and maybe, because the growth thing is, number one, that's it, we have to grow.
There's got to be struggling churches out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of churches that don't have much facilities. That, we have facilities for Sunday school. We have wonderful chapel.
Yeah, so if we did do Sunday school, we'd need,
I guess if nobody objects, maybe people should be looking at surrounding struggling churches that we could grow together.
and the,
I'm just throwing it out there.
yep.
This is just personal from me. Well, two things. Mergers can be tricky. They can happen, but who's in a blended family like me? Transitions aren't always smooth. There can be some hiccups along the way. But here's what I most want everybody to hear is that if a church is going to grow, if a church is going to thrive, whether it's full-time pastor or part-time pastor, it really depends on the spiritual life and vitality of the lay people. The point of the book, a major theme of the book is when you move from full-time to part-time, doesn't have to, but it can open the door for a new sense of people stepping up and getting into ministry instead of saying, that's the pastor's job.
Okay, do you want to start the book? Let's go ahead.
Okay, who's chapter 1?
Who's chapter 1? Who's chapter 1?
Pat.
Okay, Pat. Here. This, is it? Here, there.
Okay, first of all, this is an example of what we're all going to have to do if we go to part-time, because this is not my comfort area. I don't do book reports real well, so bear with me. My chapter was mostly an introduction to the possibility that we would go from a full-time to a part-time and what exactly that would entail. Mainline Protestant denominations were part-time in increasing the norm. That meaning that there are more and more churches that are considered mainline that are going part-time. And I think the percentage was near 50%. Okay, about 43% of U.S. mainline congregations have no full-time paid clergy. And that was in 1819. That's when the statistic was, and it has increased. What used to happen, excuse me, in rural America is now happening in metroplex areas. So now we have to lean on each other if we do this, and the vote is that we do that. That we're all going to have to step up and do a little more in certain areas of the church. We have very gifted people here who can do a lot of things and to help our pastor. And I think we're very capable of doing that. One of the things that people have been so afraid of is if we go to part-time, that means that we have accepted that we are a dying church. And that is not true. What Gilbert just suggested is what we're going to need to do. And a pastor cannot do it all. We have to be willing to step up and do our part as lay leaders of the church, or just lay people. You don't have to be session members, to come out and say, could we talk to such and such church and ask them if they'd be willing to come join us. I'd like to just read this little thing. Mainline congregations begin with an increasingly assumption that full-time ministry is always ideal, and it isn't. We were afraid if we wouldn't be a real church if the pastor were to go part-time. But and that was from a Ron Bookbinder, who was a ruling elder at a Presbyterian church in Arlington, Virginia. He realizes in hindsight that this was unfounded. Clarendon made the switch and is thriving in multiple prospects. Obviously, that's what your task force and your session hopes that's going to happen. There were no dissenting votes that this was not something we needed to do. It was all in agreement. And so we're just going to have to be willing to step up and grow. And as Linda's PowerPoint said, if we grow and we're too big for a part-time, we could always go through Presbytery, do all the documentation, and we can go right back to full-time. One of the things chapter 1 went through was that the Apostle Paul was a part-time minister. He built tents to sustain himself while he did ministry. And so I think we can't argue that the Apostle Paul would probably be a great example of what we need. I think I'm going to close. I think everybody in this room has read the book, and you can decide what you want. If there's any questions on chapter 1, I'll try to answer them, but I don't, you know, I didn't write the book, so, okay, Gilbert, you're going to put me on.
No, I'm not. I do believe that this church was joined by the Moravian Church back many years ago.
That's right.
And they were Czechoslovakians and maybe mostly Catholics. But they joined our church, and it worked out just fine. I never heard anything repeated negatively about it. And that was the only reason I came up with.
I think it's an excellent idea we need to look into.
Struggling people. I mean, we're a struggling church, and I think we're receptive to trying to revitalize this church. And we should keep the Presbyterian doctrine and all, but it seems to be real adaptable to most people, I believe.
I think you're right.
I mean, it's pretty wide open what we can believe. I mean, at least it is to me.
Everything in moderation.
All right, that's all I'm saying.
Okay. Is there any more, or could we go to chapter 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's Steve.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm going to play a recording that Steve made. That made me think of the bell curve that Glenda talked about, which is the life cycle of an organism or an organization: birth, life, decline, death. Every living organism follows that, unless there's an intervention. You bringing up the history of the Moravians United reminds me that as we looked at the history of this church last summer, revival played a huge part on several occasions in the earlier days of this church. So we're resurrection people. There's always the possibility of reversing the decline when the Spirit falls and people's faith starts to come alive and grow. Okay, let me turn on Steve. He'll be a little bit bassy, and let me know if it's loud enough.
Chapter 2 of Part-Time is Plenty by Jeffrey McDonald. Following the establishment in Chapter 1 of the validity of the part-time model in church pastoring, McDonald uses several specific examples of churches to move immediately into an explanation of the necessary step wherein congregational members begin to assume more responsibilities of church function. The reality exists that there are many, many essential functions that must be accomplished by church personnel, including leadership. But can those responsibilities be handled differently? Should they be handled differently? We first take a look at some responses from members of Christ Episcopal Church in Vermont. The priest position is now handled by a part-time person. We also are introduced to an idea of just how few of the duties that are often handled by the pastor are mandatory to only be handled by clergy. As an example, our own pulpit has been filled and many a wonderful message delivered by lay members in our past. Of course, so also could many other pastoral duties and examples noted here. To make such a transition work, planning, education, and creativity are needed from the entire church organization. We are also shown multiple examples of churches now flourishing after successful transitions to new models of function. As a summary statement, one congregation member states, "It's up to us to keep the church alive." But we all know it always has been. The most significant hurdles, as always, are in converting intent to action. Planning is key, and our church would have the luxury to plan ahead. The pressure on most churches is that members look up and realize that the church should have made a transition a long time before, and must now leave quickly and in a panic to manage to continue to operate at all. This most often occurs for financial reasons. We are, of course, blessed that the First Pres Ennis has some financial resources available and therefore some flexibility. In another example, we have Clarendon Presbyterian Church dealing with a problem originating from within staff, but with a similar result. Pastor in a burnout position that cuts back to part-time is a stimulus for a change, but it acts to move the process along. The principle here is that a change can stimulate creative, outside-the-box thinking. But aren't we always in need of such thinking? So where does the talent come from? Where do we find the expertise? The only answers are to either hire talent or draw talent from our members, or both. With the limitations of part-time clergy, it must come mostly from the congregation. Personally, many of you have heard me say that First Pres is heavy on leaders and challenged on followers. Our question would be, what are we each ready to give so that we may reap the benefit of greater involvement? Such is the nature of a distributed pastorate. Summary of Chapter 2.
Okay, Steve says you're big on leaders, not so on followers. You buying that? I see some nods. Gonna need both. Questions for Steve for Chapter 2? All right, Jody immediately asked to do Chapter 3 when we parceled out the assignments, because that's really key. Tell us about different models we might look at. You need to be able to see that.
Can all of y'all see a little bit? Okay. I did volunteer for this because I knew I could make a visual. It was the teacher in me. But this chapter is what will the pastor's role be? And the first few bullets were mentioned at the beginning of this chapter. To preach weekly, provide pastoral care, direct meetings, spearhead missions, organize programs, and manage staff. Now, I have a comment about this, although it's not really, it's my opinion, it's not what the chapter talked about, but to kind of help you with the thinking part-time, the part-time pastor would preach weekly and provide pastoral care. But other than directing a session meeting, or maybe, I can't think of too many other meetings, that one came to mind. The spearheading missions, organizing programs, and managing staff has already been taken care of by the session or within the individual people that are employed. They take care of their own business, and again, a session member oversees that. Our session is very active, and they're over in charge of so much stuff. And then from there, they feed out to other people to help them. So right now, really what Pastor John, and I hope you can disagree with me, but he does preach weekly, and I know he provides pastoral care. He's very good about getting us organized, and he does oversee our session meeting. But all of this is not what our previous pastor was doing. Our session has been the active role in this. So which brings me to, there are three types of ministers suggested in chapter 3. The equiper, the ambassador, and the multi-staff. And I think after you've read it, you probably think that you can see that all three need to be in the one part-time pastor you pick. But I'd like to highlight a couple of things, as some of the others have done. This is really important. Seeking a part-time pastor should not be a hunt for a hero who will provide full-time ministry for part-time wages. A healthy, thriving congregation with part-time clergy accepts the pastor's limits and lives in its potential. As lay people discovered, they don't need a pastor hero. I already feel like we have so many lay ministers within our church, lay people working. So I want to give you a pat on the back, because I think that kind of reinforces it, and also reaffirms that we do so much of this already. So that this is not stuff that we're going to be putting on the part-time pastor, because we're doing it. Congregations should expect that God will send the right person who is attracted to this type of ministry. I've heard questions, well, how do we know what's out there? We don't, but we have to pray that the right person is going to come to us. It said if an Oscar were awarded for part-time ministry, the category would be Best Supporting Cast, which is all of you. Okay, we're getting ready to talk about just a little brief explanation of the models, the three here. In vital congregations with part-time clergy, 3 pastoral models have emerged, and I just mentioned what they are. They are not mutually exclusive. More than one can be operational at once. So, again, if you've read this and really concentrated on it, you see how ours kind of all mesh together. The equiper If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. The equipper builds up the lay people's capacity for effective ministry. Rather than spend time reinforcing the notion that he is the only one who can do a host of tasks, the equipper endows lay people to do more for themselves and the communities. And I think you all can see that we are very active through the women's groups, the men's groups, and with our outreach and mission things. The equipper will depend on what the community needs, and he will or she will help us to be directed in what more we can do to be involved in the community, to possibly be witnesses, not only through maybe jobs we have or organizations we belong to, but how we can better serve. There were some examples given in this book of how some of these pastors went out and had fun activities with street people. I mean, just odd, different, random groups. Maybe that's what we'll have to do. And it did yield, in some cases, a few people showing their faces in the church and becoming involved. Because the equipping model is versatile, it can build up the laity for more than outreach. It can also be used to make them stronger in their ministries to one another. For example, if a pastor were leading a Bible study group full-time, and then you went to part-time, then the part-time pastor as an equipper would help the person that was going to be in charge of it how to do the Bible study group. By equipping them to ask questions, to start group conversations. Anyway, that's what an equipper does. They help you with areas that maybe you don't feel as comfortable with. The ambassador. It says sometimes the newly part-time congregation doesn't need equipping as much as it needs something more adventurous. The lay people might already be spiritually mature and well-versed in areas of ministry, from leading worship to teaching the Bible. And I feel like we kind of have a lot of those check marks. Now they need someone who can represent their congregation in the wider community. They need an ambassador. And that goes on to talk about some examples of that. If the church can cover a lot of these areas, such I was saying we really do, then that allows your pastor to bring in new people by being out in the community, being a part of things. And I will say, John has, since he's been here, he has been involved in everything that he can hear that's going around, and he goes and people know him. I had someone say, well, the other day, and I said, oh no, he knew our other police chief, and he has been in meetings with that. He's done this, and they said, well, I didn't know that. And you know, a lot of times he's very secretive of this, but our session knows about it, but maybe not all of you do. But we need someone who's out and enjoys being in the community like John has. I can give him lots of checks and stars there. Anyway, I won't dwell on that. It's just talking about how the ambassador does go out in the community, and we as the lay people in the church assume a lot of responsibilities, which we know how to do that. Now, the last one, the multi-staff team member, that's just where you have different people over different places in your church that are all being paid by salary to do different things. And they're just kind of a part of that team, and they have their area that they're responsible for covering. And it also talks about sometimes these churches can afford full-time. There's an example given. It doesn't, because they have a part-time does not mean that they can't afford it. It just means they choose to disperse their money among different programs, and that they all work together for the whole of the church. And so that's kind of what the multi-staff team member does. And I'd like to finish with this. Faith communities are increasingly waking up to the prospect that they could experience more vitality, not less, by making responsible shifts to a new ministry model with part-time clergy in the pulpit. Greater lay engagement, more energy, and staff diversity mark a few of the benefits, but they don't end there. So this kind of, I'll leave this here so you can kind of look at it and realize that we cover a lot of these areas, and so probably we're looking at a combination of this after you read that chapter. And if you haven't really read it, you might want to go back and kind of look at it again. Any questions? That means I must have done a good job, or I was too much information.
Thank you, Jody. Another really super key growth for any church is the multiplication of ministry. So you don't do it, you get somebody to come alongside you and train that person who trains another person. That becomes a small group where spiritual faith is nourished, but you also, so one of the reasons why you don't want me to carry on, because I do everything myself. But if you find somebody who equips and trains, it multiplies. That's a key secret. Okay, Nick has chapter 4.
Okay, chapter 4 is titled, Is That a Real Church? With a Part-Time Minister. And very simply, the answer is absolutely yes. The church isn't the pastor as much, the church is not the building, it's us. And so that's not going to change, whichever direction we go. One other thing I'd like to bring up, that when the task force first came to their decision, a very important part of this was that it would free up additional funds for, more ministry and stuff. That was one of the key things of their decision. It wasn't a matter of so much the financial situation we were in, but that was, that part-time would allow us to possibly grow in the ministry. So anyway, that's about all I have on that. So.
Thank you, Nick. Chapter 4 is really written for presbytery level folks. A lot of staff members of regional governing bodies in denominations have the mindset that a healthy church has to have a full-time pastor. You got to get over that. And so that's what that chapter is directed for. But there's one piece in chapter 4 that speaks to me, and that is research bears out very clearly that there's less anger, frustration, disappointment on both the part of the part-time minister and the congregation. When you hire a full-time pastor, you think, well, I want that person to meet all of my expectations. That's what we're paying her for. But if you've already negotiated, okay, we're going to go part-time, and these are the limits, it just reduces that level of why isn't the pastor, why hasn't the pastor called on so-and-so, or just that whole stress level gets reduced. I think that's huge. In every church I've ever been in, there's just lots and lots of just disappointment and anger at the leader for not fulfilling. You get rid of them, or you reduce that significantly. Okay, who's got chapter 5? Steve.
Okay, I told Judy that my report to you would not be like my hair, too long. This particular chapter is about the theological education for a part-time future. And up front, basically, if you read the book, you know there's lots of, that this chapter is not really all that directly relevant altogether. Not all of it, anyway. And some of it is actually off-putting. There's a little bit of an emphasis on visionary institutions, which could add a third way beyond today's two most prominent models. The third way, beyond, and the first two, you hire a full-time person, and secondly, the second of the three is you equip a second career kind of person who preaches as well as finishing another career. What we're aiming for now with a part-time pastor, we hope, is that they would be a part-time ministry, and the model that they're talking about is that part-time minister could have another line of work. He could be like Paul, a tent maker, like you said, or he could be a carpenter. In getting to know people here in Ennis, and basically a lot of them, because they worked over our house doing this or that, we've run across Paul Eckerberger, who is a ordained minister, and he serves at a different church, but he doesn't serve full time. He is a painter and a carpenter, and he does part-time ministry. Chuck Ellison, who power washed our house, is also a part-time minister, less so than Paul, but still in a different church. John Massey, who I was working with on the website, and which is kind of on hold because we can't really take pictures that we need to take. We may be able to do that soon, but it's kind of on hold. Josh is also in a different church, and in addition to being a website developer and helping us on that, he has a ministry to kids. He at our most recent Rangers game, the last one of last season, he brought a couple of kids, right? Just a couple of boys. Is it the what ministry is that? You know?
It's related to Give a Kid a Chance, but it's a mentoring program, Christian mentoring program that Ennis ISD, God bless them, has embraced. So we would love to have pastors and church members mentor our troubled kids. You got to go through some training to be in the program as a mentor, but he does a lot of mentoring and promoting the mentoring.
Right. So these are some examples of people outside of our church who actually have some training to do, and they do a second career. They have a main career, and then they have a second career doing various aspects with their church. And so I thought it was interesting that so many of these are in this itself. Okay. I did these very neatly on postcard size kind of just paragraphs, basically just summations, just picking out the most significant thing as I went through the chapter. But since it really has not that much bearing on us, because it's all about theological teaching. It's all about, that's what the chapter is about. It's about equipping how seminaries can change their model to equip part-time pastors, future part-time pastors. And unless somebody here is actually interested in going to seminary, becoming our part-time pastor, which would be a great thing. I don't have that much to say about what the chapter says. Does anybody want to step up and become our part-time pastor? You know, if so, you would go through the seminary, but you would have to find a seminary that actually prepares you for part-time. Most seminaries are very expensive. This is the kind of stuff that the chapter says, which you don't really need to know, but it's very expensive. And then you don't get paid very much for being a full-time pastor. So the models are changing, and part-time pastors who actually have another livelihood are becoming a new model for us. I thought one thing that was rather interesting to me was that the model that we use today for part-time pastors in Protestant churches didn't really happen until the industrial age. That's when it started. Before that, it was not a seminary taught pastors that made that a full career. Okay, so are there, Judy, did I mention anything else to you that that you thought I should bring up? Okay. Are there any questions about this chapter? I did want to point out one thing, then I'll ask about questions again. This book was not published until this year, 2020, and it's the first edition. So when we made, as a mission study team, the recommendation, and then when the session approved it, it was without having this book. This book is going to be very significant, I think, in the way we look for our next pastor. It's going to help us find the right kind of guy or girl. So we were led by the Spirit, I think, to go this way, to make this recommendation. And this book coming out later is some substantiation. Are there any questions? Okay. Oh, and Henrietta came by yesterday and dropped off something she wanted me to read. Shall I do it now or after that?
Is it germane to chapter 5 or?
No, it has nothing to do with chapter 5.
Let's hold that off. One thought about chapter 5 is that there can be training for laypersons. Doesn't have to be at the seminary level. In a full-time pastor's package, there's salary, there's housing, there's medical benefits, there's pension, there's a book allowance, there's a travel allowance, there's an education allowance. You can take some of those education dollars and train lay people to be good at hospital visits and let the Spirit, the healing power of God come through during those visits. Or you can, you can train lay people at whatever level to do the jobs. You might even pay them part. So I think that's a valuable point. Okay, and bookending the presentation, she started us off and will close us out with chapter 6 is Glenda.
Okay, guys, I know this book didn't completely apply to us, but what I got out of the last chapter was, it's called Teaming Up. And so I just jotted down some things. One thing that we're fortunate to have is our location. Where we are in Ennis, at the epicenter with Farmers Market, and we're right here. So I think we need to, like for Farmers Market, we can do an art show where we can have a theme. We can pick a theme. We have this nice space in here. You have people coming in to see our beautiful church. We could do coffee and donuts on the lawn. I feel like we could do a fill the bag. That's where you just, if we have all those donations, things, you clean your closet. We don't have to do the big thing we did a couple years ago for Dixie, but out on the lawn, people come by, it's free, it's for donations. You fill your bag, but while you're filling your bag, we are talking about, we have game night and we have this and we have this. We need to promote our church outside of our little friend. And the thing about having the age we are, all our friends already go to their church and they almost get a little offended when you say, we need you to leave your church and come to our church. So that's where we just need to get new people. We can do the concert that we had, the Ellis County Singer thing was fabulous. People came in, they loved it. It was wonderful. We need to do that annually. We also can have guest speakers come. We can have people come and we can advertise a course on smart money or nutrition, or we also can do tea circles with ladies of the church. We can bring a guest. We can have a Christian book review, have someone come and give a review. You don't have to be part of a book club to do that. We should do that. We should have a Christian book review whenever we want to and invite friends and have a tea. Also, my big thing though is our school system is the largest employer in town. And when you think about a teacher, they're here on the weekends unless you're a coach. Because a lot of times your job, I was a flight attendant, I went around on the weekends, couldn't come to church. Scott was a fireman, couldn't come to church. But those Monday through Friday in town, I think when they first come in, we need to somehow, since the EISD does the mentoring thing, I just think we need to kind of either put it in their packet, see if we can't go to that opening thing, advertise our church. I know it's church's sake, but I think with Vespers, as long as the church isn't doing it, it's okay. I mean, the school's not doing it. You've got new people coming to town. You may have that new young person who needs a church family. They might be moving from somewhere. We could do a thing called Single Mingles Night, where we just invite the singles to come, like through the church, through the school, and bring a friend and have a singles mingles. But also we could do pizza with the Presbyterians or picnic with the Presbyterians, and we could have it at the very beginning when they first come back to school. We could do hot dogs either out here, or we could meet at that nice little park we have in town. But we need to get the school system people involved in our church. I just think, there's people that maybe have been away from church for a while and they're looking for a new one. So those are just some new ideas that we just have to think on chapter 6. It was thinking outside the box a little bit. And also what Steve just said about there may be that person who is an artist or teaches piano lessons, but maybe they're called to be a minister somewhere and they're also looking. There's someone out there looking for us too. And that's all I have to say. Okay, over a question?
We used to have a hamburger cookout before one of the football games every year, for example, which was well attended, as I remember them. Hundreds of people came. I think the men of the church probably did it, or at least I remember cooking hamburgers. But it just got people in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know if it necessarily increased the congregation or anything, but we did it every year and it really was well.
I think we need to get back to some of that, not so much just doing a booth to make money, at the,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's kind of a weekend where you need to probably help. We're all involved in so many other things. That's what happens, is like, I can't help because I'm part of this other group. But I think that we can maybe grab into that, set that August feel when people are going back to school. You know, back when as a mom, my schedule runs from August to July. I'm not a January, December person, because when you have kids, you just have that your calendar's completely flipped. But maybe that's something we can do to, and you know, even if they just came a little bit, then maybe it gets to be more than a little bit. So, and we, you know, we have our game night, and we used to do the Wednesday night thing, but we need to kind of just, we don't have to jump out there and do it all at one time, but let's just do some more. Okay. Kay, yes, Kay.
On that note, I was telling Sarah when I got here this morning that, of course, I got through my Facebook. I was looking to see my daughter-in-law's birthday, but I was seeing what they were doing on their vacation. But one of our mutual friends, Christy Evans Campbell, is a member of the Damascus Church. And she posted on her Facebook, if you're wanting to attend a church, indoors, then feel free to come to our church. We are having church services. So a bunch of us are on Facebook.
There you go.
And if we posted that, then maybe we could get more people here on a Sunday that don't have a church service at the church. It's all online right now, and they're missing being in a church.
And
So I'm telling my Facebook friends, we need to post it.
I agree, and when we start doing these things, it needs to post that way, and we're working on our website, trying to get it up, because I went on trying to, if I was moving to town and I'm looking, we're not where we need to be as far as our website and stuff. So that's all coming on board. We're just trying to, right now, this COVID thing kind of just scattered us down a little bit, but don't lose focus. I think we're done with the task force, we're done with the book, we're done talking about it. I think now we just have to press forward and start to look at resumes. I appreciate your time. It wasn't supposed to be this long, but I have some paperwork for you, Bill, that will answer maybe that question about the money.
Okay, thank you, Glenda, and thank you, everybody. I realize I may have sounded like throwing the wet blanket on Gilbert's suggestion about merging with other churches. You can start by cooperating with other churches. Invite a small congregation. Let's do a blessing of the pets together. Let's whatever. So partnerships is a big theme of Chapter 6. Partnerships with other churches, other nonprofits. You can if you say, oh, we're just a few and we're older and we're tired, but if you get several organizations together, you can have fun, make new friends, and make an impact on the community. Okay, so I gather that Henrietta wanted something to be expressed in this gathering, and she has given it to Steve to share.
It's front and a little bit at the back, and it doesn't have a single period. So it's not that many
William
capitalizations.
Faulkner said
So I have to kind of read it as I see fit. In regard to the purpose of our meeting today, looking back as far as the 1940s, we've weathered many trials and tribulations.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, sure. I think that the topic is why you have a full-time pastor or a part-time pastor. Either way, decision needs to outline the responsibilities whichever way we go. Because we're a small congregation, we could use, there was a period. Because we are a small congregation, we could use a part-time pastor with so many hours a week that day should be outlined by the session. His duties, what are the things we need to look at? Is communication with our congregation. I smile. As we are, he could call, make a personal contact by phone to each member on a weekly basis, just checking on them and finding out something about them so they could chat every week. And if they have any needs, we have several people in the church that will help them take care of such needs. whether it's delivering groceries or just from running errands, that I think that the main thing that we need to take care of is our congregation weekly. The other thing is, that is important, is there to visit in the community and go to the coffee shops in the clubs that we have in town, such as Rotary Club or the Lions Club, and get acquainted with the people and let people know that we do have a minister in town. Hello to his coffee. Can he have in his office, let's just act like that he's going to be there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Let's say from 9 or 10 o'clock till invite people down to come in and have coffee at these times and let them know that I want these days and those times that someone will be there, and that's important as well. The other time that is important, it should be on Sunday morning, to be in his office, say 9 o'clock until he preaches. We have had pastors to come in as early as 8 o'clock and have sessions with different members of the church. I would say I don't think it matters whether we have full-time or part-time. What matters is if we're, I think this is the gist of it right here, of what she's trying to say. I would say I don't think it matters whether we have full-time or part-time. What matters if we're taking care of our congregation on a one-on-one basis or weekly and a regular basis and keep in contact. And if we pray to work together, then I think we can make this go either way. Sorry, I couldn't read it any better. It's kind of continuous. Anyway, she really expressed her love for this church and that she will support the decisions.
May I have a copy of that
You can have
to send out in an email to everybody? Thank you.
Do you think you read the book?
Say what?
Do you think you had read the book?
Did you get her, anybody an extra copy? There's an extra copy.
I'm not sure, but she has some ideas very much worth considering. Okay, any other comments, questions? Kathy Morse has made 2 cakes. She told me, and I'm a little bit fearful of serving food, but if you want a piece of chocolate cake, Kathy will cut them without touching them, put them on a plate, and you may enjoy that. Sarah.
My only question is, are we going to have a congregational vote about this?
No.
Okay, that's, my assumption was that the session would recommend what they wanted to do, that we have a congregational vote about it. So we're just going to move forward with the part-time pastor without a congregational vote.
Correct. It is in the province of the session. So if you have, this is just a general comment. If you had a problem with this or any decision, you would find ways, and I or any other pastor would help you do this. Try to get the session to reconsider. But it's not a calling a pastor full-time is a congregational decision, and there are a couple other things, a nominating committee. But other than that, everything else belongs to the session. So this particular decision is also one of those. There won't be a congregational vote. Okay, let's have a prayer, and we'll send each other on our way in blessings. Thanks, Lord, for this time together, and thank you for, again, how you have nurtured us through the birth and the life cycle of this church so far, and we trust you to continue to bless us and use us in ministry and service, witness, and evangelism. And so we ask for your Spirit to empower us and embolden us as we continue to seek your will. Pray it all in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.